Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Politics Unplugged. I'm Ann Trujillo. And we begin with a Colorado case that made it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it started with a wedding cake. The High Court sided with a Lakewood baker who refused on religious grounds to make a wedding cake for a gay couple.
It was a big win for religious freedom. It was a complete statement on their fact that you can't discriminate against religious freedom in the workplace.
Now, the decision was narrowly focused. It came out swinging against the state Civil Rights Commission. Here's Denver 7's Mark Stewart.
As Jack Phillips worked the phone, his supporters came to celebrate at the Masterpiece Cake Shop in Lakewood after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on his side.
I'm very excited about the whole thing.
In 2012, Phillips refused to make a wedding cake for the same-sex couple, saying it would violate his religious beliefs. The couple sued, and the Colorado Civil Rights Commission weighed in, deciding Phillips discriminated against the couple. Yet in a 7-2 ruling, the High Court said when the commission considered this case, it did not do so with the religious neutrality the Constitution requires, saying his First Amendment rights were violated.
It's just wrong to legally bind someone to something that they can't, with their conscience, do.
It's devastating to feel like you lost.
Charlie Craig and Dave Mullins are the men behind the case.
Obviously, we're disappointed with this ruling.
But there are no regrets, knowing this case is part of a bigger dialogue.
In the end, all we've been asking for is to be treated equally in places of business.
While this ruling fails to make a sweeping statement about whether or not businesses can turn away gay people, the Supreme Court will likely tackle other cases in the future, including that of a Washington state florist who refused to provide flowers for two men about to get married.
I think that we're going to need more guidance from the Supreme Court in order to know exactly what is and is not permissible in this situation.
So the big question many of you are asking is what's next? How will this decision impact gay rights and religious freedom moving forward? The court also blasted Colorado Civil Rights Commission for failing to adequately consider a baker's religious beliefs. Well, joining me now to talk about all of this is Denise Maes from the ACLU. So thank you first and foremost for being here.
No, thank you, Ann.
The ACLU was part of this suit. And essentially the baker won, but it really is not that simple, is it?
Correct. And I think as the news started to come out of the Supreme Court on Monday morning, I think a lot of us felt a little bit, this is not going to be good, because the first thing you did see was that the court was ruling in the baker's favor. But really, when you start to read the opinion, you realize, first and foremost, which is what you said in your opening comments, is that it's extremely narrow, and that's a saving grace, quite frankly.
So let's talk about that
Sure.
narrow focus, because it really is focused on the Civil Rights Commission. What did that mean? What's the issue then with the Civil Rights Commission?
Well, I think what the justices were saying is that they did not feel that the Civil Rights Commission, which is really the entity named in the case, that the Civil Rights Commission was simply not neutral in regards to the religious objections, I guess, that the baker was raising in its case. And in fact, Justice Kennedy in oral arguments referred to it as, it seemed like some of the commissioners had an animosity toward religion, is in fact something he said from the bench during oral arguments. So I think that really bothered Justice Kennedy and obviously bothered the 6 other justices as well.
And so then what does this say about gay rights? In Colorado, in the country?
Well, honestly, and that's the good thing, the decision is so narrow that it really does nothing about Colorado's anti-discrimination laws. That act still exists. It is still unlawful to discriminate with respect to public accommodations, employment, and housing based on a person's sexual orientation. So those laws still stand strong. The Civil Rights Commission was just reauthorized by the legislature this past session, and it has a 10-year sunset review. So really, none of that changes. Those all stand firm. And I also want to emphasize that the Supreme Court was also very clear that there is no First Amendment right to discriminate based on one's sexual orientation.
So what's next for the couple?
Well, you know, one of the things, I think Charlie and Dave, they've been in this fight for 6 years.
Right.
You know, 2012 is when this all began, and I think they just want to take some time off. You know, I think they feel good that they took on this case. We feel thankful for their courage in doing so, and I think they made some good law, and good for them. They're going to be heading up the Pride Parade here next week. So,
what does this ruling say to Americans? Do you think it says maybe some issues don't belong in court, or just pushing it back on us to say communicate with one another? I don't know.
Yeah, I think in some ways, you know, I think the Supreme Court, they wanted to dodge the bullet of having to decide, you know, rights in public accommodations versus religious liberty. And they dodged that bullet, and they're very good about trying to narrow their decisions whenever they can. And so, yeah, I think they were trying to tell us, work it out. I wanted to highlight, and this is one piece that I wanted to mention from Justice Kennedy's opinion. You know, he did write that our society has come to the recognition that gay persons and gay couples cannot be treated as social outcasts or as inferior in dignity and worth. So I think he's telling us a lot there, that the gay community does should expect dignity. They're not inferior to other individuals within our society, and they should be free to go through the commercial resources and get them as anybody else would.
Well, it was a fascinating case to watch, and thank you so much, Denise. Actually, is there anything else any other takeaway that you wanted to point out here?
I would say no. I think we've covered most of it.
Okay.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Denise Maes from the ACLU. Appreciate it.